Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's Anthony Carpenter here on the 23rd of January 2022, and this is the second video of basically the previews of what's happening in local democracy and local government in and around Cambridge. So let's kick on, because I've just done a previous take of this and that went over 20 minutes, which is enough to bore anyone. Now, last week I went to an event which was basically all about this government's levelling up agenda and how we're going to be spending, and are already spending, lots of money on turning Cambridge into a global life sciences hub, if you hadn't kind of guessed already. And it was basically a broadly scientific audience, because the Minister for Science was there, as was Dr. Nick Johnson, the Mayor of Cambridgeshire in Peterborough, even though the host, who was kind of like the Europe director of a big life sciences and data firm, kept on saying, "Oh, Cambridge." Now, whose Cambridge are we talking about? And that really comes down to actually one of the big issues, if I call it locally, as to what the future of Cambridge is ultimately going to be. And obviously my issue now is I've been scrutinising local democracy here for over 10 years, and I'm basically bored of it, in that everything just goes around and round in circles, and actually the problems are structural, as you've probably seen from my blog posts, for those of you that read them. And so I wrote a blog post called, basically stating, "Levelling up will fail if it is built on broken structures and fractured relationships." I also looked at why the Combined Authorities Transport Consultation, the first one, which was late last year, generated so few responses, but more on that later. Now, let's go straight into Cambridge City Council, which has actually got only a couple of meetings of note. This is the Joint Development Control Committee and the Environment and Community Scrutiny Committee. Now, first one, Joint Development Control Committee. The main thing that they're looking at here is this new country park that you may never have heard of. And the proposal basically is, it's kind of the council saying, really, I think it was through previous local plans, this amount of land is going to be country park in return for releasing this bit of green belt or fields to be built on. The houses, in the grand scheme of things, have actually nearly all been built, as far as I'm aware, for that section. So there's going to be this new Hobson Country Park. The strange thing is that it's going to be on either side of the M11, and so one of those things I keep on thinking is, cover the M11 so you don't have all of that noise. But there's a map on there, and you can have a look in more detail if you want to. Environment and Community Scrutiny Committee, again, there are a number of things that are on there, but the really interesting thing for those of you who want to get a feel for what the various community groups are in Cambridge is they've basically got the list of community grants that the officers are asking the councillors to approve to award to the various community groups in Cambridge. So what the table shows is not just the individual organisations, but how much they've requested, how much their total project is going to cost, because this can be match funded as well, and obviously who's getting what for what. The other thing is this contains the COVID funding as well, and like I said, a total of almost £1 million is being handed out. The great thing when it's match funded is it brings in funding from other sources, so actually the total impact that you get is far more than that. Now, moving straight on to Cambridgeshire County Council and the Joint Administration, a number of things that are kicking up here. Highways and Transport Committee, keep an eye out, not so much in this committee, but actually in the committee in March, because they are going to be discussing all things active travel and cycling and walking infrastructure. I found the 2017 report, which is the one that's going to be replaced in March, should be published at the end of the month. So keep an eye out from that one, especially for those of you in the Cambridge Cycling Campaign and the Living Streets campaign group. 27 strategy and resources. The thing with this one is, and the one that's going to be making the headlines, is the shareholder review of this land. A big house. It was a housing company created with a single shareholder of the county council, created by the previous Conservative administration, and in the grand scheme of things it ended up just being very, very controversial over a whole host of things. But do read John Elworthy in the Cambridgeshire Times for more on that, because it's actually quite dense and complicated, but it needs an expert or someone who's basically been following the whole thing through. In fact, John is an expert on this, to make more sense of it. Finally, the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority. We've got 3 meetings this week, the Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting. So by the time you view this video, they will have had the meeting and it should be up on YouTube. And with this one, this is where the mayor turns up to be scrutinised effectively by backbenchers over what his plans are, and in this case they're going to be asking him questions about his transport and infrastructure, or rather transport and connectivity plan, because as I mentioned earlier, the responses to his initial consultation have come back and there are a whole host of issues related to that I've blogged about. There is his Combined Authority board meeting, and the agenda is just like, whew, it's huge and it's very, very heavy going, and it's within that they will be having another discussion on local transport and connectivity, and it's in that set of meeting papers, item 4.1 appendix 1, that's where you actually find the details. You've also got the University of Peterborough mentioned in there. They start taking their first students in September of this year. When everything's been built and they are fully up and running, they will have something like 12,000 students. I wrote a blog post saying, can we have a dental school too, because I've had to go private in the chronic shortage of dentists that we have, because my dentist is no longer doing NHS patients. You've also got a couple of other reports, the draft Employment Skills and Strategy Action Plan. This is also something I've been vaguely interested in as far as an adult education college, if I can call it that, or a lifelong learning college. I want one built in Cambridge. I want it built where it also has a light rail stop, so it's easy for everybody to get to. So there are a couple of quite big reports that are also buried in that one. And then finally, for this week, there is an audit and governance committee meeting, and when you look through the papers, it's just all numbers. But again, this is the stuff that it's very, very important to scrutinise, because one of the things that a lot of you were debating and were concerned about in the run up to the mayoral election was whether the proposals for the Cam Metro actually stacked up. So it will be interesting to see what conclusions come from the various strategies that they've got all listed here. I'll leave it there and see you next week.